Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Diane Porterfield from the Connect and Communicate Series Planning Committee. Thank you for joining us for the Connect and Communicate series presenting Working with Student Organizations to Enhance Outreach to Underrepresented Groups. This discussion will be recorded and it will be made available to Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division members through the PALA CRD YouTube channel, as well as to registrants and available on the CRD blog. For this discussion, you will only need a headset or speakers. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat box at the bottom throughout this discussion, and we'll attempt to include your questions as appropriate during the discussion or at the end. We'll also do our best to assist participants with technical issues. Please post those issues in the chat box as well. This session is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Library Association College and Research Division's Connect and Communicate series. I'd like to thank the CRD board for supporting the Connect and Communicate initiative and the other Connect and Communicate Planning Committee members, including Adam Belchunas, Amy Snyder, Ronalie Chioco, and Christy Edelman-Ritter, who is also moderating today. Please contact any of the team for information about becoming a PALA member. This project is made possible by a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services as administered by the Pennsylvania Department of Education through the Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf Governor. And finally, I'd like to thank and introduce our presenter for today's event. Paul Mcmonagle is the Engineering Instruction Librarian at Penn State University. Welcome. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Diane. And now for the hardest part of the whole thing. Hoping the share screen and slides work. What does everybody see at the moment?
The presentation, you're good.
Oh, great. The problem with using dual monitors sometimes is what appears on one screen may not appear on everybody else's. But thank you. I'm talking today about working with student organizations to enhance outreach to underrepresented groups. And as Diane mentioned, my name is Paul Mcmonagle. I'm the Engineering Instruction Librarian at Penn State University Park. Just a little bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about today, just a bit of a background on how this all started. And then what we did last year and plans that we have to improve and continue the program based on what we've learned. Now, within Penn State's College of Engineering, close to half of our undergraduate students identify as a member of one or more groups that are underrepresented in engineering fields. As we all know, these students are bringing great ideas, awesome perspectives to their chosen fields, but they often need advice and other help to ensure they succeed, mainly because oftentimes there's not as much support for them as there may be for other groups, mainly because there's a history and a bit of a background of how am I trying to say this? The STEM fields have not always been as welcoming to certain groups as they are today, and we're still working on it to make them more open. And we at the Engineering Library believe that we can play a positive role in providing support to these students by creating an environment that nurtures their growth as researchers in a space where they can feel confident just being themselves. So how many of you have planned an outreach event for your library? You spent lots of time, lots of energy, created like the greatest, most awesome, epic event ever, and nobody shows up. Anybody ever run into that before? I know I have. Usually we plan something internally, just amongst ourselves, and then market it to potential attendees. However, attendance is often low due to a multitude of factors, including the fact that students may not be interested in the same things we think they're interested in. And we may end up conflicting with other events. So what we've decided to do is to include relevant student groups from the very beginning of the planning phase, hoping that one, it'll engage a larger audience. And by including the target members of that target audience in the from the very beginning would help make the content timely and useful to the students. So I was looking at other universities to see if they have done anything similar, and programs at the University of Texas and the University of Toledo have proved to us that what we're planning was possible. It's been working in other places. So we talked to several student groups to see if any were interested in creating a pilot program to see if it would work at Penn State. Previous to this, we have a space at the entrance of our library that was being used for displays created by our student employees that were describing different resources accessible to patrons. And we ended the fall of 2019 with a guess the number of paper clips in the bucket contest that ended up being really popular with students, and it proved to us that they were noticing what we've been putting up in that space and that they're engaging with it. I don't remember how many paper clips were in that bucket, but I do know the number was well over 10,000. Just in case anybody was going to ask at the end of the presentation. So for spring of 2020, we were able to put up two monthly displays. For February, we had a Black History Month display with the student chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. And in March, we had one for Women's History Month with the Society of Women in Engineering. So what they did was each one created two posters, and you can see the posters on the slide, with the information about their organization and highlighting different alumni who've made it through the program, just kind of letting students know that it's possible to be themselves and be an engineer at Penn State and actually graduate and go on to do great things. What happened towards the end of this was we put the Women in Engineering display went up at the beginning of March. Everybody went home for spring break. And then we came back in about 18 months because that's when we had to shut everything down for the pandemic. But that gave us a bit of time to review what happened and prepare for a year-long program when we came back. And so this is what we originally planned on running. Nothing during the summer, because part of the reasoning behind the program is that it gets the information about these organizations out to the students, and during summer it's just didn't make any sense to schedule a student organization to have that month, because they weren't getting they wouldn't get the same amount of engagement as groups who would present during the regular fall and spring semesters. As I say, with a December, even though we were here, most of that time is spent getting ready for finals and finals week. So we didn't want any, we wanted students to focus on that and not on creating a display for us. And then with the September and January, we're still trying to come up with groups that might be interested in doing it, and that'll be explained more on later on in the presentation. So we had a 5-month set aside, 5 different groups who may come in and create displays. October, we had the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science, and they really kicked things off with a great display. Everything from books on the history of Native Americans in science, the history of Mexican Americans in science and engineering, to posters that they've presented at conferences, different members of the group, and information on the chapter, and then just a general information. And it was a really good way to start everything off. They had a lot of a variety of different things to look at, and it was very well engaged by students. Then in November, we had a good display from the Penn State's Indigenous People Student Association. And at this point, I should probably explain the squash. Penn State has a student farm where students go and they can grow they can actually farm and grow food. The Indigenous People Student Association has their own section of that farm where they're growing crops that were native to this area, including the squash was actually grown in that garden. And they allowed us to display, just to give an idea of some of the things that the group can accomplish. And I do not know how the squash tasted because I did not get to eat it at the end. But it was much larger than it looks in the photos. And it was kind of cool, and it got a lot of comments from our patrons. And then in February it happened. I found out about a week before the last week of January that the email that I had been sending everything to, asking if they were interested or not, was an email that nobody checked anymore. So I was working with our faculty advisor to get the correct email. But by the time I got into contact with everyone, there's less than a week to create an exhibit, and I didn't want to rush them. So what we did was we just reused the previous posters from 2020, and we also added a small collection of books to the display. And this was definitely something that we were able to learn from for future reference. And in March, the Society of Women in Engineering really went all out. Just like the October display, they brought in a lot. There's a lot to look at, a lot of information. Again, everything from books to information on a successful alumna in this case, information on the organization, what they do. And just like with October, there's a lot of interest from the students who are just coming up and asking questions about the display and just trying to gain more information. And then April, we worked with Out in STEM. And they had a little table display with so people can get contact them for more information. And then just a little bit of information about themselves, their organization, and what they do. But we had our student desk employees count the number of interactions they noticed with the displays. A couple of things I should keep in mind, I should point out to everyone, especially those of you who aren't familiar with Penn State's libraries, is that the engineering library is not located with the inside the main library building. We're co-located with inside the College of Engineering, and our space is really hard to find compared to the other libraries on campus. So our normal patron counts are a lot lower than you would expect in the gigantic library up the hill from us. And our employees themselves said that a lot of times they kind of forgot to mark down when somebody interacted with the display. So I was told that I can take these numbers and pretty much double them, and that would be closer to what we were actually getting interactions with. And I say that to say, even though these numbers kind of look low, for us, that's actually a lot of interaction. And we also noticed that the displays that had more information, that covered more space, they were engaged more by our patrons, and patrons are asking more questions and getting more information from them than they were from the smaller displays. And we are continuing on this year again with this. The one big change that we're doing month-wise is that we're switching the October display. So it'd be from September 15th to October 15th to cover Hispanic American Month and Penn State's celebration of it. We're doing a lot more work with faculty advisors to ensure that the student groups are aware of what's going on, so that we don't have the same mistake that happened this past February. Also, next Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the semester, all the student organizations are having an activity and a involvement fair that is held outside the hub on a gigantic lawn that's between the hub and a College Avenue. And as I did in 2019, I'm going to head over there, talk to the groups themselves, just let them know that we're here and start getting them thinking about ideas and what they might want to do. That's helped us out in the past. I'm also working with the College of Engineering Center for Engineering Outreach and Inclusion to find a group who would be willing to create an exhibit or display for January. And also working with the college's, excuse me, not the college, the library's assessment department to come up with a way that we can better assess interactions and the impacts of the exhibits. And even though I tried to talk as slowly as I possibly could, I want to thank you very much for your time. And if anybody has any questions or comments or ideas that we can use to improve the program, I'm totally willing to listen.
I love this idea. I have questions, but please put your questions in the chat and we will relay them. So first, who had to count all those paper clips?
I'm trying to, I believe it was, at the time she was a staff member with us, Angel Peterson, who's up in our publishing department now.
Okay.
So in my defense, the whole thing was her idea in the first place.
It's a great idea.
It was a great and we gave out prizes and the students were all happy. Or at least the students who won were happy.
Yeah. So what does the library, so the student organizations create the displays, right?
Yes.
What sort of support do they get from the library, or do they get any support from the library? They just do it all themselves?
We review it with them just to ensure that thing is nobody will get in trouble for what they put up there. I guess I should say. And we also give them the space and we help them. They create everything, but we help them set it up.
Okay.
Because we thought by allowing them to create it, because they know more about their organization and more about who they want to reach out to than we do.
Okay.
So it's just an opportunity for them to get out there. Let's see a couple of questions in chat.
Yes.
We often have trouble identifying. Excuse me. I'm a little congested today. I'm allergic to pretty much everything that grows in Pennsylvania. My voice is going in and out, and I apologize for that. We often have trouble identifying and contacting student organizations. What were my biggest obstacles to making those connections? Just besides the dead email addresses, just getting a hold of them in the first place, trying to figure out who to talk to and what connections to make. Once I discovered that nobody would look at me weird if I went down to their student activity fair and just started talking to the organizations, that was the best way I was able to do. It was just leaving a library and actually outreach to the students. How many desk employees does my library have? How many do we have, or how do we want? I think we're going to have maybe 8 this semester if we're lucky. We need a lot more than that, but we're doing with what we can. And yes, we are using students to help recruit the groups on campus. In fact, some of the students are members of those groups, and they were willing to help us out, not only with the contacts, but also with creating the displays and making sure everything was running with them.
I think that question might be going back to how you count the interactions. So what did count as an interaction? Like just somebody going up and looking at it? That's
somebody going over and looking at it. Okay. It's near the front of the library. When you come in, you can see it, but at the same time, you actually have to make an honest effort to walk over to it.
Okay.
Because you can't see everything from where you come in.
Okay. if there are any other questions, please post them, or comments or ideas for what you're doing to reach out to student groups. That would be helpful. Go ahead and put this in the chat. But in the meantime, I will post the link to our evaluation survey. And so it's important that you please take time to submit your responses to that evaluation survey. We are required to submit evaluation data as part of our LSTA grant applications. And I'm going to wait a little bit more to see if any other questions come in.
Diane,
Yes.
is there any way I can send out these slides to anybody who wants them?
Sure.
If
I
anybody's
believe
even
we have
interested.
everybody's email. So if you want the slides,
I mean, is anybody interested in having
yeah,
these?
go ahead and post it, or
slides?
maybe we'll put that in the email when we send out the link to the video, the
Okay.
recording.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam's going to send them with the recording. So with that, I think we will wrap up, but go ahead and post as I wrap this up. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And Paul, thank you for presenting for us. I hope everyone will take a few moments to complete the survey and let us know your thoughts about the presentation today and about our programming in general. As a reminder, the recording for the presentation will be available to the PALA members early next week on the CRD YouTube channel. If you're not a PALA member and you're interested in becoming a member, please feel free to email me. I will put my email in the chat too.
I do have a question.
Paul has a question.
Paul has a
Somebody
question.
has a question.
Did anybody learn? Was this worth your time today?
I
That might
thought
sound like
it
a strange
was, because I
question,
think
but I
this
want
is
to make sure that
something, I think this is something like we keep hearing about how students want to see themselves in either in our collections or in our services or even in our, as part of diversity initiatives. And this is like a solid way to do that. I love the idea of putting like, here's the alumni that are working in your field that look like you.
because part of why I wanted to present this was I wanted to see if what everybody else thought, if I'm even on the right track or just gathering ideas.
I appreciate hearing people talk about sort of passive outreach, like what you're doing for displays, because I feel like it's something that sort of gets pushed to the like, yeah, of course, there's going to be a display there. But hearing you putting really thoughtful effort into it, involving students, making sure it's what they want to see and that they're represented. It's great to hear that you're doing that. And it also sort of helps me think about how we do outreach. So it was useful to hear and also useful to think about how I do it myself.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Feel free to make them. If you have any ideas for future discussions or presentations, please contact me. And especially if you would like to present, we'd definitely like to hear from you. Laura likes the idea of outsourcing library displays. Boots on the ground verb. I like verb and gumption.
Boots on the ground. I haven't heard that one in a little while. But thank you everyone for showing up and for your time today. He's old school.
All right, I'm posting that evaluation link one more time. Please fill it out. And otherwise, have a great day, everybody. Thank you, Paul.